All right, well, I'll go ahead and get started. So just a quick introduction on myself. My name is Justin Chalfant. I run the team at Patch My PC. Our company does third-party patching and application management for SCCM. And this is really going to be a live demo. We're going to walk through exactly what we do, how the setup works, how everything gets into SCCM, and how that deployment process works. First of all, I would like to thank Frank for having us out to his group. I used to work with Frank as a PFE at Microsoft for quite a while, so super excited to be here with you guys today. So as far as the environment goes that we have the demo in, we're just running a Configman site. We're actually on 1907, latest tech preview build, but we'll be walking through what the setup looks like within this environment. So the only thing I'll kind of point out before we look is we don't have any third-party updates currently enabled. So we're going to go kind of through that process, exactly what that will look like start to finish. So we only have a few Windows updates at the moment. And feel free to ask questions throughout the session. Usually we get a ton of questions as we're going throughout the demo. So feel free to ask that here, as well as in the chat window. We'll be kind of monitoring that as well to address anything throughout. Now, as far as our installation for how we're going to start publishing updates and applications to SCCM, we just require a small installation, and it's going to go in your top level software update point. So within our environment, it's pretty basic, just the standalone primary site. So we only have one site system with the software update point on that server. But you would only need to install the tool that's going to publish the updates on your software update point within SCCM. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. So it's just an MSI, only a few megabytes, so very lightweight for the actual utility that's going to be handling the creation of third-party applications as well as updates that are actually pushing them into SCCM. So we'll just go through this pretty standard, just everything default here. And then OK. All right, so this is the first part of the tool that you're going to get to. I'm just going to go ahead and activate it with one of our demo licenses. Now there's a few options. You could either activate a trial mode, so you don't need to fill out any type of information if you just want to enable the public trial. And that's going to give you access to a subset of products that you can use to validate publishing works and things like that. If you want a full access 30-day trial on the same download site for the trial, there's a form you can submit where you can get your own license ID, kind of like what we're seeing with this custom URL. And that will be valid for 30 days if you want to test all products and features within the tool. Okay. Now, as far as prerequisites go, the only real thing that we have is a certificate that needs to be added. So this is the WSUS signing certificate that's used to sign any third-party application or updates that gets published. This is how your clients can validate that any updates being pushed through the Windows Update Agent and SCCM and WSUS are coming from a trusted location. Now, within Configman 1806, there's actually a feature within the software update point that allows you to enable this and create the certificate directly within SCCM. So it makes the process a little bit easier, where if you're on that build or newer, you can just say, I want SCCM to manage this, and it will also automatically deploy the cert to your clients. Now, if you're not on that build yet, it's easy to generate it in our tool using self-signed, or if you want, you can import a code signing cert from a PKI if you have that configured within your environment, if you want to go that route. So since we enabled this within Configman, that's why we're already all good to go as far as the prerequisites go with the cert check. So once we have that configured, the next thing is choosing what third-party updates you want to publish into SCCM. So you can see that within our tool, it's quite similar, right? If you go to your software update point, it's the same type of tree view that you would get with any Microsoft product. So if you were to come into your SUP, you can see, Windows 10, same type of concept here, where you can choose what products that you actually want to publish from our catalog. So jumping back here, there's a few ways that you can do this. You can either selectively kind of choose what you want to publish as an update within SCCM, or we also have this scan feature. So if I go ahead and click on scan, what we can do is enter in our SCCM database server name as well as the database name, and we can actually query against your SCCM environment. So this is going to look at the hardware inventory sent in from your clients, and we're going to aggregate based on what clients have what products installed, how many of those that we support directly within our tool that you already have out within your environment. So for example, we're going to give you things like the installed count that we detected. You can even sort by these numbers if you want to see of the products that we support, which ones you already have. From here, you can select them all. If you just said, I want to enable everything that I already have, and then you can enable them. You can also export this list. So if you're just trying to validate, these are the number of apps that I would get and benefit from directly within what Patch My PC supports today, you can export that to a CSV. Just mute everyone here, just hear a keyboard. Got it. Yep. I didn't mute myself, did I? You guys still hear me okay? I think we're good. Yeah, you should be good. Cool. All right, so jumping back over to that, what I'm going to do is we can see that if we just wanted to enable everything that we detected in the scan, you can simply enable all the products that are already out there within a couple clicks. So it's super simple versus trying to pick and choose what you think you might have, but you're not really sure, right? So that makes that process quite easy. Now for this demonstration, I'm not going to go enable everything that's detected because we have almost all products configured in this lab. We're going to select a couple individual products here. Now, before I go and enable some products, I do want to cover some of the customizations that we can apply to anything that we enable recursively. So for example, we can see I'm clicking the all products level. So we can apply any of these settings recursively to any of the products that we enable later on. So the first helpful option, if you wanted to, you can choose to automatically close any conflicting processes within the installation. So for example, let's say that you had an application that you knew may not update correctly if it's in use by the user, like Notepad++ is one of the applications that sometimes will fail to update if it's in use. You could choose to auto close that or skip it if the process is in use. Next thing we can do, we can delete public desktop shortcut. So for products like Chrome that leaves a public desktop shortcut for all users, we can automatically delete that after any update is applied if you don't want that to be on the public desktop. This one's quite helpful. We can turn off self-updates. So if a product supports a common attribute like a reg value, or if it creates a scheduled task or a service, something that we can automate turning off, we'll be able to support disabling self-updates within those products. And then the last option that we can apply globally is going to be logging. So this feature is pretty cool. I'll kind of explain what we're doing here. So let me just copy this path. So we can see that this secondary path that I'm about to add is just a UNC path. So this is going to be a location that you could kind of monitor. So what we do by default, we can enable installation logging for any update or application that supports logging. So that would be all MSI-based products that use an MSI installer, and any EXE installers that support a log switch. We essentially are going to automatically add that within the update or app installation, and you can specify a common folder that you want to create that to. So this can be helpful in a scenario that a third-party update or application install fails. Rather than getting our 1603 error that we probably see quite a bit get reported back to SCCM, you would actually be able to look at the installation log to see at what point during the vendor's install that process couldn't complete the update. So there's a few things here. So by default, we're going to store the log path in the CCM logs folder, just within a subfolder that we create. But what's pretty cool about this, we can prefix the log with the computer name, and then what we can do is, if the update failed, we can optionally set a path that we want to copy any failed updates to. So obviously you wouldn't want to have every single update for every single install go to this network path, right? But this could be helpful if maybe you want to have any failures, so non-zero exit codes, get copied up where you can kind of troubleshoot them in that scenario. As long as domain computers have modify rights to whatever share you want to dump logs, that should be able to copy that to that secondary location. So this is actually something we added this past week, which was requested at the last user group we were at last week, the Minnesota group. So pretty cool feature where we can copy only failed logs if you want. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is actually jump to a product that we want to enable for update publishing. Now once we get into the individual product level, we do have some additional customizations that we can apply. So we can add a custom pre and post update script per product. So let's say that for what we're going to look at here is going to be Google Chrome. So we're going to add a post-update script that uses a PowerShell script to set the home page. So you could have like a standard configuration whenever Chrome gets updated or installed within here using a PowerShell script. So there's a few different formats that we support. Let me go ahead and click on that. Was there a question or no? So we're going to add a post-update script. Today we support PowerShell, VBScript, Batch, and you can even add an EXE or an MSI file as a pre or post action. So depending on like if you want to do like some dependencies, you can do some interesting things there. Yep.
We do have a question in the chat. What is your average lead time between vendor release and when we are able to use Patch My PC to publish it?
Sure, yeah, it's almost probably about 95% of the time it's same day. There's a few exceptions to that. So if there's a specific day where there's only like one update and it's not a security update, that may be a scenario where we push it to the following day. But it's almost always same day regardless of security or other types. But if there's only one or two updates that aren't security focused on a specific day, it's possible we might push that type of release to the following day. Yep. Okay. So for this post-action script, I'm just going to go ahead and browse out, and we can just see we're just pointing to a PowerShell script. So pretty basic here, and it's just setting some reg values to set the home page, as well as some different Chrome policies that we're configuring around password management and things like that. So if there ever was a scenario where you wanted to do something a little custom, maybe setting things like Java safe websites, things like that, you can have whatever flexibility that you want by automatically adding actions within your own scripts to the update process, right? And then the other two that I kind of mentioned were modify command lines. So if you wanted to append additional command lines, maybe if it's a paid product, you want to add something like a product key, something like that, you can do that. And then an MST transform you can apply if the product is an MSI-based installer. Okay. The second product that we'll enable for update publishing is going to be Java 32-bit. We can see that we did also configure the disable updates and logging option that we did in the previous step. The only other thing I'll note about Java, this one's kind of particular. So we do append a pre-action script by default that's going to remove any old versions of Java as a pre-action. So what this does is make sure that you're not left with multiple runtimes. You're only going to have the latest one whenever an update applies, and we'll handle removing those older versions for you throughout the update process. Cool, so that's pretty much what it looks like as far as enabling updates for publishing. So these are gonna come into Configman as a software update, and these can be used to update outdated versions of existing applications that you've installed in your devices. Now, this only addressed one of the needs here. What we noticed from feedback from customers is, that's great, but I still have to manage the initial deployment. So I have to create applications. I then periodically will want to update those, so I'm not deploying an old version before the update starts scanning. So it's kind of leaving you exposed to older versions for a while until that scan process for updates come in. So what we recently released is this feature that we call base installation. So in addition to the updates that we just enabled, you can also enable application creation within Configman as well. So as far as enabling this is pretty basic. We'll just enable that option. And there's a few simple settings that we need here. So you need to tell us where your SCCM provider is, as well as the content source path. So this is going to be where we automatically download any application content for any of the application products that you enable for publishing as well. There's a few additional options here that we can do. So like, for example, do you want to allow the application to be installed in a task sequence? Just some items that correspond to what you'd probably be accustomed to when you're creating applications within SCCM. And one thing I'll mention here is by default, so this is a pretty big one, we do automatically update previously created applications in place from our tool. So that means, let's say, for example, you had Chrome version 74 created as an application, and let's say 75 comes out in a few days. We'll automatically update the existing application in place, update your DPs. So for example, if you were referencing that app in a task sequence or collection deployment, if you left the default behavior where we update it in place, you're always going to be deploying the latest version of that product, and you don't even have to think about it in that scenario. Optionally, if you want to create a new one for each version, that's an option as well, depending on testing and things that you may have to do within your change process. And then the last option here, we can auto distribute to distribution point groups. So we can automatically put that out on your DPs and update them whenever a new version comes out. Cool, so that's all. Yep, question? Yeah, good question. So the question was, can you configure per application whether you want to update it in place. So today that is not configurable per app. It's kind of a global setting, but I think that may already be in our user voice. So we have a user voice page, and I want to say there's an item in here that is similar to that, where they want to be able to control settings per app. There we go. So it's already in our user voice, so it's something that we're reviewing now to basically configure whether you want to auto update per app. So it's something we're going to be thinking about as an option that we want to update. Okay. As far as the applications we support, now that I'm here in the browser, I'll quickly go over that. So we currently support about 300 and some odd updates across the 190 unique third-party products. So this is all documented on our page here, where you can go and check out what we have. Now, what's important here is that if we have a product that you used that we don't support today, you can go request new apps on that same user voice website, ideas.patchmypc.com. And if we take a quick look at the application request, out of those 190 or so third-party products, about 80% of those have actually come directly from customer feedback. So when we're evaluating new applications to add, it's solely based on customers that are actually requesting that specific app. And you can also do things like vote up other apps and kind of see what's going on within our user voice site, similar to the way that the config manager team does it as well. So the question was, what's the turnaround time? It really depends. So when we used to generally do it in about 2 to 3 weeks, but just the scale that we're at now, it's going to vary depending on like how complex is the installer. It would have to meet some prerequisites like silent installs, working under system context, but it could vary depending on like how many customers are voting it up. So maybe if there's a really popular one, it could be a couple weeks. If there's one that's maybe only one request, maybe it's a little longer to kind of evaluate and get through that. But I would say we're not doing specific timeframes now, just because the scale that we're at, it's a lot more than how we used to kind of handle new app requests, and that's why we had to bring it into user voice. You see kind of what clients want what, and searching for existing requests, things like that. So ideally, I would say within a few weeks, but realistically, with how many requests we're getting now, it could be a little longer. It just depends on the product and complexity there for that. Yep. All right, cool. So the application, so the view is going to be exactly the same as what products we just enabled for software update publishing. So what I'm going to do here is come in and enable 7-zip. So that's one that we did not enable as a software update. So let me just enable 7-zip 64-bit. And what we can also do, so if we look at Chrome, we have this option where, let's say that you went through the update piece, you scanned your environment, and you enabled a bunch of products that you wanted to publish as a software update. We can click this duplicate option over here on the right, and that can automatically duplicate any products that you enabled for update publishing, as well as any of the right-click actions that you may have applied for application creation as well. So we duplicated that. We can now see that Chrome was auto-enabled as an application, and it also enabled all the right-click actions like disabling updates, the custom post-action script that sets the home page, as well as the logging and shortcut options, all got enabled for application creation as well. Okay. Any questions up until this point? Did we get anything on the chat? Okay, awesome. So that looks good as far as what we want to publish as a software update, as well as what we want to auto-create as an application within SCCM. The next thing I'm going to jump over to is the sync schedule. So I'm just going to go ahead and start the initial synchronization, which is going to get products downloading in the background and starting to publish. So this will probably take about 3 minutes or so to go through. And while we're waiting on that, let me just kind of review the sync schedule. This is going to be how often our publishing service is going to reach out, download the latest catalog from our service, and determine, based on the products that you enabled for update or app creation, whether there's been any new updates on our side. If there are, it will auto-publish the new update and then supersede any previous versions of those updates or applications. So by default, it's every night at 7 p.m. Kind of touching in on that question about how often we update. If I jump over here and look at our RSS feed, so we do post each release out to an RSS feed. So for example, we can see we had a catalog update yesterday. This one was actually pretty massive, I think. Let me take a look. So within here, we're going to show all of the products that were released in a specific day's update. If it's a security update, we're also going to include things like CVIDs, right? So you can quickly see things like that. You can even click directly out to the vendor release notes. So if I go ahead and open that up, we can see this was one of the Adopt Open JDK products that we support. Come back over here. And yesterday, I think there were probably about 20 or so updates. So we can see we had some updates for iTunes and iCloud. They were also security related. So just a long list of products that kind of got updated here. Now we do also scan every single installer through VirusTotal. So before a update or application would ever get published to our customers, we would be scanning that installer binary through VirusTotal and including those results in the hashes out within our release RSS feed or email newsletter, just to kind of make sure that we do due diligence on the installer to test against different things. So this includes about 64 different AV engines that basically scan the binaries before any update would get released. So that's kind of the global notification. So you can either subscribe to that RSS feed or you can subscribe to the newsletter if you want to get an email version of that exact same data, right? So you can do either of those options. Now, in addition to that kind of global notification that you would get for any products that we support, so like all 300 and some odd updates, whenever we do an update, all of those would be included there. Now, if you don't want to get all that data, maybe you only care about the updates that you've actually enabled for publishing within your site. You can enable email notifications directly within our publishing tool here as well. And this would only notify you when there's actually been a third-party update or application for a product that you've enabled that gets updated or published within your site. So you can also configure it here, or you can even do both depending on how you want to stay up to date with new products coming out. Right. So that's pretty good on the publishing tool, I think. So it looks like we just completed our publishing. So let me take a quick look here. Oh. Jump back over here. So we can see that we just got emailed that we have new Chrome updates configured. So that looks good. Now Java, this one is a little bit different. So Java is a licensed product now, and we can now handle licensed products. Basically, the way that it works is that if there's an update like Java where you require a portal within there to download that content, we can still support that. The only difference is that you would have to kind of pre-download it into the content folder that you define for licensed products within here. So pretty cool, but what we can see is that when updates get published within the email directly from our tool, you can see things like vendor release notes, for example, right? So we can see the release notes here. Let me just scroll that down. We also include things like classification levels, so we can see that this Chrome update was security related. It also had a critical severity level, and it also had some CVIDs here as well. These are also clickable, and it will go out to the National Vulnerability Database where you can get details about that specific fix. Now for Java, it looks like I didn't have things quite ready to go here. Let me just see if I can copy something here just to get that to publish. If not, we'll just work with Chrome, not a big deal. Let me just see if I can get this working really fast. Use this. So what happened is when Java released update 221, I think this was earlier this week, I just didn't copy that just so I could kind of demo what that looks like. So if I come and look at where I actually have my offline content folder in the J drive, let me just see if I can get that running. And Java is the only product that requires a local content publishing. So let me just copy that in here. So now we have the latest 2 versions that it said it couldn't find. So even though it is licensed, you can still certainly patch Java. Just every quarter when a new update comes out, you would just get an email like this letting you know, hey, this is a licensed product, you would want to download this, and then the next time we run a sync, let me see if I can get that running, it would be able to use the local installer for JRE to publish that as an update and application. So we'll get that running. Any questions while we're waiting for that sync to occur and before we jump over to the SCCM side of things? Okay, I must be covering everything pretty thorough. Awesome. There we go. So we can now see that we detected the Java update locally, and now it's publishing just fine. And this is the only product that requires a manual download today, and that's just because the licensing changes in April's update for JRE, where it's now paid for business. Did that affect anyone here where they started to make that a paid product for corporations? Yeah. So what we did to kind of address some of that, there are some open source versions of JRE now. So we actually support quite a few of those today. So we support the Adopt Open JDK iterations of Java, as well as Amazon's open source version of it as well. So that we found a lot of customers starting to move to some of the open source JRE platforms because of those licensing changes for Oracle, and we can patch and deploy those as well. All right, so from the SCCM side of things, there was one option here that I'll call out. Whenever a new third-party update gets published to WSUS, we also have this option where we can automatically trigger your SCCM software update point to sync. So what that means is that we got this email saying, hey, Chrome in Java was just published, and it's going to automatically sync your software update point so they start showing up within your Configman console right away. So I think that Java just completed. So if we go back to our email, of course, we can see that we got this notification saying, hey, Java just published as well, because we had it in the local content. So we can, of course, go out to release notes. We can see the different CVIDs corresponding to Java. And let me just copy this, and I'll show you on the SCCM side of things how we can search for some of this data. So if I come back to Config Manager, if you remember, we only had a couple Microsoft updates when we initially looked, but now we have our third-party patches showing up within the console because we auto-sync that software update point right away. So they're showing up just right after they get published, so pretty quick as far as the sync time goes. We can see, of course, all the same data. So your compliance statistics, this is going to show up just like any other Microsoft update where you see how many machines required or are compliant with third-party patches. They also deploy the exact same way, where you can use either searches or ADRs to configure all your deployments of the updates. And we can even see if I search for the CVID, it's going to show the update directly in the console as well. So we do include CVIDs within the description of every update, so it's a searchable property directly within the console. If you wanted to say, hey, there's this CVID my security team's looking at, let me see if I have any updates to show what's being affected and fixed within that specific version. So from here, yeah, just not really anything different. So we could say, let's look at the vendors, patch my PC, if you wanted to do searches to create your update groups, and then you can come in here, create your groups, and download them. Now in this environment, we're using an ADR. So if we come over here and look at our ADR, quick look here, we can see that there's not really any different between how you would create the ADRs for Microsoft versus this. So we're showing non-superseded updates that are critical update or security, where they're coming from Patch My PC. So this would essentially pick up only third-party patches, but you could even include our updates in your monthly ADRs with Microsoft as well. There's no technical reason why you couldn't, but we generally split third-party updates into an ADR and then maybe Microsoft into a different one. But you could use whatever method you're currently using today to deploy these updates. As far as the deployments go within our ADR, we've got a couple pilot groups, so same type of things where you can have multiple deployments. You're going to be using all your existing infrastructure and SCCM technology like collections, deadlines, software center experience. So do you want to have users see the updates, as well as things like maintenance windows and restart behavior. Everything's going to be using the exact same flow that you'd be using for any Microsoft update. So when this ADR kicked off, it auto-downloaded this into a deployment package. That's going to, of course, go to all your existing distribution points, so you don't need any type of additional infrastructure or client agents. Everything's going through Config Manager. So it created our update group, and then also did those 3 deployments within that update group within our environment. And then the only other thing we'll take a look at from the SCCM console side of things are the applications. So in addition to the third-party updates to get published into Config Manager as a software update that you could use to patch existing devices that are outdated, we also created those applications for you as well. So you could use this within your task sequences or collection deployments for actually deploying those apps and keeping those initial deployments patched as well. So for example, we do fill out quite a bit of details within each application here for Software Center as well. So things like keywords, icons, description, things that are going to make the end user experience better if you're doing available deployments will be configured here within the app creation as well. And like I mentioned, these do also update automatically. So let's say Chrome 76 comes out. The default behavior is that we would update that existing app that we already created in place so that you'd always be getting the latest one if you had it referenced. Question, yep?
Does that change anything on the detection method? Like
It does.
Manage that?
Yeah, exactly. So let me go ahead and deploy these apps and then I'll come back to that question. So the question was, what happens with the detection method whenever an app gets updated in place? So what we would essentially be doing if we come in here and look at our detection method, we're using a PowerShell script for the detection methods of these apps. We would automatically update that so that the version of the application being detected would auto update. So if we look at this is kind of the main things that we're looking at. So it's kind of a mix between if it's an MSI-based application, we would search for the product code as well as the version greater than or equal to. So if you're doing a required deployment, I don't know if that's kind of where this came, you could potentially update existing products using the app model as well. Just depends on what scenario you would prefer. But we would automatically update detection method and the version that we're checking whenever a new app got created in place. Now the other option would be you could just have a new application for each version that comes out, and then you could handle associating or updating that as you need. Yeah, question?
Are you superseding or?
Good question. So today we are not superseding. So the option would be, do you want to use the same app, update it in place, update detection method, or create a new one? Supersedence is something that we're going to start trying to support. So overall, this app feature is relatively new. So we released it within the last month. That's one thing. We may even have it on our ideas portal. Let me take a look. But we do want to support supersedence. We just need to test whether, yeah, so I think it's, no, that's not the one. But we do want to look at just having a supersedence option where we would create a new app, but we would set the supersedence relationship. Things can get a little tricky with how many versions do we want to keep supersedence for? How does that impact the provider in scenarios where you have a lot of apps created? Because there's a certain level where that can start becoming an issue. So we just need to make sure that we test all the scenarios and get it done right when we do add it. But that's kind of a thing that is on the radar, to be able to use the default supersedence and just create a new app and supersede any previous ones up to a certain amount, basically. Yeah, good question though. Anything from, doesn't look like anything in the chat. Cool. So jumping over to the client side of things, if we go ahead and look over here, this device is part of our pilot collection, so we can see that the deadline was set for 1 day from now. But since we did show this in Software Center, we can see that we are able to install that ahead of the deadline, just like any other Microsoft update that you would deploy like this. So the only thing I'll note here that we do have some outdated versions. So we have Chrome 67 and we have Java 8 Update 161. So both of these are out of date. If I go ahead and kick off my Chrome install, the only thing that I'll note here is that if we go ahead and open up Google Chrome, we can see we don't have any type of custom home page. So just the standard Google Start page if you were to deploy the MSI. So nothing going on there. And if we take a look at the shortcut, we can see it is in fact on the public desktop here as well. So what should happen when we install this, we're going to update Chrome, we're going to automatically remove the shortcut, and then we're going to set the home page using the post-action PowerShell script. Now, if you remember, we did also enable the verbose logging of the actual vendor's installer. So if we open up CCM logs, where your client logs are, we can see we created that subfolder that we defined, and we've got the verbose log of Chrome. Now, in the event that, let's say, Chrome failed on this device, we got a bad exit code, that's when it would copy it to that network share. So you would say, hey, we see that this specific computer name with this device failed, and you could actually see the log from Chrome's MSI, because that's really where you're going to get the most value in troubleshooting an actual installation error. Usually the exit code is pretty generic, right? So that's where that log can come and be quite helpful. In addition to the vendor's log, any updates that you've enabled any custom actions on, we will have kind of a standard generic log that shows a lot of basic details about what's happening. So this will be in the root of the CCM logs. It does use a format compatible with CM Trace, so just like any other SCCM log. And this one's just called Patch My PC Script Runner. And this is going to show any update and custom actions that are being applied based on the right-click options that you may have configured for that product. So for example, we can see that we enabled the action to kill Chrome. In our case, it wasn't running, so we didn't actually terminate anything. We can see any type of customizations like registry values that we're going to configure for turning off updates for that product. And we can also see the logging switch that's going to take place. So here's where we actually executed the Chrome installer. We can see the MSI returned exit code 0, which is a good install. After that, we deleted that public desktop shortcut that we configured. We then set 2 different registry values for turning off the Chrome auto update check. We can see all that within the log. And then we ran the custom post-action PowerShell script, and it returned an exit code of 0 for that script. So that looks good. And then we end the install. So if you're ever kind of looking at anything that's ever been done through our product, whether it's an app install or an update, here's kind of a log file that you can get a lot of helpful details from. So if we jump back to Software Center, we can see that Chrome is now installed. The shortcut is now deleted. If we go ahead and search for Chrome and launch that, we can see the home page did get configured using the post-action PowerShell script. If we look at the settings, this was also a system level setting. So the user wouldn't be able to come in here and actually change that. So pretty cool. You can basically set however flexible you need to get with those post-action scripts. You can do whatever you need. So yeah, that's Chrome. So now if we refresh that, we can see Chrome went from version 67 to version 75 dot something. So the next thing we'll look at is Java. This one's actually kind of cool as well. So if we take a quick look at the existing Java control panel, we can see when we deployed this application initially, we didn't turn off self-updates, right? So we can see updates are set to check every week. If we look at the Java update policy in the reg value, we can also see enable updates are just set to 1, which would be that default behavior if you didn't specifically turn things off. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and kick off Java. Now we did enable the option to auto-close conflicting apps for Java. So what's going to happen when I click install, we're going to see the Java control panel app on the left auto-close. If we look at the Patch My PC log, we can see here's where we actually terminated those processes for JRE. Now we're running the auto uninstall script of previous versions, and now we're updating the latest app here. If we go ahead and look at our logging folder, we should also see the JRE verbose logging here as well. So if we come back up here where we put the installer vendor logs, we can see the actual Java installer taking place within that update install as well. So we'll copy that to the right. Here we go, put Patch My PC on the left. So once there we go, so Java just completed. Now we're going to turn off the self-updates using 4 different reg values. You can see all that happening in the log as well. So if we come back into the registry and refresh, we're going to set enable updates to 0, and then we also are going to configure 3 other values for turning off different notifications around JRE updates. So that would happen just by right-clicking and clicking that disable updates on that Java product within the tool. So pretty helpful for basically trying to enable common things that customers are asking for to make it a simple action that we can perform for you. Okay. All right, so that's Java. So if we were to come back into the Java Control Panel app, we can see that the update tab is basically completely hidden because that's the way they handle it within their control panel app. So that looks good for that. The only other thing we'll look at now, if we go back to the application piece, since we had that script deploy the apps to all users, you can see you get a nice experience here. You can see description, keywords, icons, release notes, just all the things that we populated within the application on the admin side for you. So we don't currently have 7-zip installed. So let me come back over here and go ahead and kick that off. And this is just a standard application that would get installed just like any other Configman app. So if we go ahead and open up our log, it's going to be the same exact log that we use for updates as well. So when this 7-zip install gets kicked off, we can see that we're now executing the vendor's installer, and you can see all the verbose logging there as well. So it looks like that completed. And now we have 7-zip. So if we come back into add and remove programs, do a quick refresh, we can see that we've deployed 7-zip using an application that just basically automatically got created for you to help save you the packaging time as well as the update piece that we offer today. Cool. So at this point, we are pretty much good to go with those 2 updates as well as 7-zip. Let me try to figure out how to minimize this now that, uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so jumping back over to the server. As far as compliance goes, everything's going to be exactly the same that you would have compliance stats for Microsoft updates. So if we were to come back into, that's interesting. There we go. I had something open. So if we come back into our all software updates, now that we've had time to install those, we're going to see all the compliance start reporting as compliant for those two updates for Java and Chrome. So if we come in here, we can now see we're compliant. Same thing for Java. Now what I'm going to do is jump over to another one of our lab environments that has some more client data and show some of the reports. So in addition to any of the default reports that are available in Config Manager, they're all going to report compliance for third-party updates just like Microsoft. But we do also provide some dashboards that I'll quickly go over here. So they upload directly into SQL reporting services, so you could run these right from your console. These are free regardless of whether you're a customer. They were actually originally created from a Microsoft engineer that I used to work with, but he was okay with kind of us repurposing them, adding some new operating systems as well as an automated installer to help change all the URLs to your environment. So you can use these regardless of whether you're a customer. If you just search for our site for like free dashboards, you'll be able to find and install these reports. So basically how many workstations and servers that you're managing, you can click in by each month. So for example, the month of July, we can see we're 72% compliant with all software updates for workstations released within that month. When we click into that month, it's going to show you what updates are missing. So for example, we have a Adopt Open JDK, so one of those alternative JDK runtimes. We can see it's required on 5 devices. It's also a security update. From here, you could click into each individual update, and that will take you into one of the native SCCM reports where you can see like what are the actual devices missing that specific update, and you can even go to individual devices. So it can drill down pretty detailed depending on what type of data you want to see. Yep, question?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat. If you enable verbose logging for an app that is already published, downloaded, do you then have to republish it, or will it only take effect for new versions when they're downloaded?
That's a good question. So the question was, if you enable logging after an update's already been published, do you have to republish that update? And the answer is it depends. So we actually have a good FAQ for this specific question. So if we look at republish, it's an FAQ about when you may need to republish. So if you enabled logging on a product after it was already published, you would have to republish it in the event that that update did not have any other right-click options enabled. So for example, if you had the delete shortcuts enabled and then you enabled logging after that was already enabled, we would be able to modify it during the next sync and just append a different command line. But if you did not have any of the right-click actions enabled on a product and then you enabled the logging option, that would be a scenario where you'd have to say, I need to republish that. The reason for that is when updates get published, they contain a specific hash. And if we don't include our customization file that allows us to do these right-click actions in the initial publishing, it would require you to republish it. But if you had any of these right-click actions enabled and then you enabled logging after, it would be able to modify that on the fly. So yeah, it just depends on whether anything else was enabled. If you changed anything on the applications, that would always be able to configure that during the next sync because it's not as specific where the hash can't change for a published update with the way that works. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so yeah, back to the dashboard. Oh, sorry, wrong machine. SCCM, there we go. Yeah, and then there's just a variety of other different charts and graphs that you can use for just reporting compliance by devices, by servers, things like that. So that's the first dashboard. There's a few other ones that are quite similar, but if you only want to see third-party updates, limit to software update groups or collections, there's different reports in there for that. But what's cool about the way that the third-party updates work is any other solution that you're using is going to report the same type of compliance data since there's no difference between the way Config Manager sees third-party updates versus Microsoft. So this is the free Power BI template that you can download from Microsoft as far as their business dashboards for Power BI. So what we can see is that if we look at this dashboard within Power BI, here's just kind of the overview. So this is going to give you a lot of details about just overall things within SCCM, right? So how many clients, what your health is, Just a lot of helpful details. But there's this piece down here around update compliance. So if we were to come down to the update compliance page, we can see that in addition to all the Microsoft updates that we're reporting on, we can see all the third-party updates as well. So we're missing Flash Player on a bunch of machines, missing Java, Foxit Reader, but they're going to show up just like anything else. We could even come in here and say, let's look at only critical updates with that severity level. And then we can see we went down from all those third-party updates to Firefox and Java and a few other ones. So you could even say, what are the security updates that had a critical severity that are actually missing here with just easy filters through Power BI. So I think that's all I had from the reporting side. So for the most part, that's pretty much the whole product and how things work. So once you've configured your products and your sync schedule, you really don't have to come into our tool anymore. It's just going to run in the background. The only time you'd have to change is if you wanted to enable or disable any products or any right-click options. Outside of that, you're just going to get emailed whenever new updates get auto-published based on your product selection and sync, and you're pretty much good to go as far as automation in the future. And then from Configman, you can use ADRs, searches, no change in the way that you can do that. So you can potentially automate everything from start to finish for third-party patches, just like you can do with Microsoft today. So yeah, any other questions or things we can take at this time? We do have a few pricing points that I'll cover. We basically have 3 options. For the most part, customers will go with either the Enterprise or Enterprise Plus, just because that includes all the automation pieces. The only difference between Enterprise and Enterprise Plus is the base installs. So if you wanted to include the application creation and auto update, that's where it's $3 per device a client. If you only care about patching with automation, it's just $2 per client. And then the basic would require you to use System Center Update Publisher to publish the updates. So it's just a little bit more manual and uses a older version of the format of the catalog that's just a little easier to manage. So that's the 3 different levels that we offer as far as pricing goes. So any questions or things we can take at this point?
Hey, Justin.
Yeah.
Go ahead. I did have a question about .NET
Sure.
Core. My internet echoes, so it's kind of hard to talk.
Sounds good from our end.
Okay. So to actually patch .NET Core, since there's parallel installs, do any of those products that you guys publish include an uninstall of the previous version, or is it just purely an install of the newest, good version?
Yeah. So .NET Core is one of the only ones that I think the way their installer technology works is it leaves the old version. Java is actually one that is similar. Let me kind of jump back to our service and explain how we should be handling, or how we could be handling that. So there's a few options that you have in that scenario. So .NET Core in your instance, there we go. So if you wanted to auto remove previous builds, that's where we could do a custom pre or post action script. So we handle this today for Java, where we have a pre-action script that essentially removes all old versions as a pre-action. That's something we could certainly look at adding for .NET Core if that's a scenario that you would want to support. I don't think we got it requested today, but for the vast majority of products, I think .NET Core might be the only one that I can think of today. We do test auto removal of old versions, whether that's just natively through the installer, which is probably about 98% of the time their installer would just handle a clean upgrade and removing the old version. But I think .NET Core is one of those ones where, depending on your scenario, you might want to test against older runtimes, but that's certainly something that we could look at supporting, similar to the way we do it with Java, where we essentially run a pre-action to uninstall all those versions. So it's certainly something that we could either add, or something that if you wanted to do it today, you could just add a pre-action script that would just call like an uninstall for any existing installs, where you could add that for that. But that certainly makes sense that we could add that as just a native that you could either opt into if you wanted to auto uninstall for that specific product that doesn't do that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
On the
Yep.
licensing, I was wondering, is it per managed workstation or total?
Yeah, so good question. So the question was, for those on the call, is the device cost per managed device or like everything? So we're pretty flexible as far as that goes. So if you check out the FAQ, we talk about this a little bit more. It's essentially what you want to manage. So we're pretty flexible there. So how is device count purchased, determined? So if you have devices that you want to exclude, things like servers, Mac devices, Linux, things that you know that you're never want to deploy to, you can give us whatever count you think most corresponds to the active workstations or devices that you intend to deploy third-party updates to. So,
I have 3 machines.
all right, there you go.
And they're all his.
Yeah.
How many products does it allow patching for? Some third-party, so they'll allow like 75 to be published through WSUS and will be.
Oh, yeah.
1,000?
Good question. So your question was how many products can be published at once? This is probably something I could have covered as we're going throughout. So essentially what I think you're getting at is that WSUS has a limitation of 100 unique third-party product and vendors that can be published at once. So what we did to work around that, so we work with the Microsoft product group to try to determine what would be the best route not to hit this limit. So on the back end of things, if you actually go into your software update point products, everything does come in as a single vendor product combination. So even though we give you a nice view about what you want to publish, it's only going to use one vendor product. So if you're using other catalogs, you won't ever hit that limit. Because what would happen for vendors that would use a specific vendor for each product and vendor, like let's say Oracle and then Java runtime, that would essentially be 2 vendors within that 100 limit. So it would end up either being that vendors would be like just some vendors would be per vendor, and then you would have like one generic one. So what we determined is we're going to just use a single vendor product. And then if you ever have to get custom, like with ADRs or filters, we have a guide on how you can use title filters. Like if you want to exclude specific updates like Java, or you want to include specific updates, we can use a title filter. But we had to go with something that would be compatible, because obviously we're well above that 100 vendor limit. So that's what we did on the back end. So even though you can get a nice selection with specifically what products you want from the UI side, when they actually publish into WSUS and sync into Configman, it's just going to show up as a single vendor product. And then you can use filters with titles or some other mechanism that you can use if you did have to get more specific in what you wanted to auto deploy, for example. Yeah. Cool. Other questions? Okay, do updates abide by this? Yeah, so reboot behavior is going to be exactly what you would configure it within your software update group deployment. So essentially what would happen is if you were suppressing restarts, or if you had a reboot window with how much time you have, that would be determined based on the exit code of the update. So for example, if it was a 1310 exit code, which means a pending restart, it would be determined based on how you configured your software update group deployment, whether you wanted to suppress those. Same thing with the reboot deadline, so the timer would come into effect. Just like any other Microsoft update that you would be deploying, it's going to abide the exact same way. Yep. Yep, no problem. Any other questions from the room or any of you guys on the Teams meeting? Cool. Well, that's all I had. So thanks everyone who came in person and on the meeting, and thanks Frank for having us. Yeah. Sweet. I think Dune is up next in a few minutes from the Configman product group, so I'll let Frank kind of take over. We'll probably have to switch some voice up on the Teams meeting, so maybe off for a couple minutes, and then Dune will be in to present from the Config Manager group.
Yep. So right, just like Justin said, obviously first and foremost, thanks to Patch My PC and Justin and Jock for coming out. Really appreciate that. Obviously, that's really awesome. And yes, Dune is up next here for us. And Dune, are you ready to roll?
I am ready to roll.
All right. So for everybody here in the room, we're going to go ahead and get started with our next portion of our meeting today. We've got Dune Desormeaux from the SCCM product team, and he is going to present some stuff for us today. So for you, Dune, if I have questions in the room, I see someone's hand go up, I'll let you know.
Sounds great. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Frank, and for everybody for having me. So I'm Dune. I'm a program manager on the Unified Endpoint Management team at Microsoft. I say Unified Endpoint Management because we're kind of one team now that works on Config Manager, Intune, Desktop Analytics, and Autopilot. It's kind of the team of 4 And my focus has been on Config Manager, and my focus is specifically right now being on software updates. And I know that you guys just had an awesome session from Justin. Thank you, Justin, talking about third-party updates. And my focus today is going to be on first-party updates for Windows and kind of some of the challenges and fun that comes along with that. I have some slides here. I don't have a huge number of slides. I like to kind of keep these as conversational as we can. I apologize that we're doing this remotely, so heckling me might be a little more challenging. There's like one more layer of difficulty, but I'm here to be heckled. So please don't hesitate to either speak up in the room or wave vigorously at Frank, or just put text in the IM window, or if you're on the phone, unmute and speak your mind. Because as the person who has been blessed / cursed with ownership of Config Manager software updates, I know that there are typically some tomatoes to throw, and that's par for the course, and we need to hear it and take those tomatoes. So so don't hesitate. That's the preamble. I kind of wanted to kick things off by talking a little bit about what we're thinking about as what Microsoft is thinking about in terms of how we're trying to make your life easier. And this is all very much kind of high-level guiding principles that are trying to take us. And you'll see as we get through them that not all of them are obviously within my control, but they are things we think that are important to you. And what I'm interested in hearing a little bit from you guys is whether these seem like the right areas for Microsoft to focus to make your life easier, and also about the order, because they are in some kind of rough priority order. As I was looking at this, before the session, I kind of realized that maybe I haven't restacked them in a while. But if you have feelings about what's more important, then I definitely want to hear about that.
Hey, dude, quick. Is that recording has started bar? Is that on my screen? Do you see that right now?
Oh, I do see that. That is, I don't know. Maybe I can dismiss this. There we go.
All right, thank you.
That's on mine. Cool. Can you guys all see the screen? I can see somebody. I think Harji's having trouble connecting.
Oh, okay. We have it here.
Okay. Okay, cool. Seems to be working.
Okay, cool.
Let me know if there's technical difficulties. Also, it's weird. I'm seeing some of the IMs on my phone and not on my computer, so I don't know why that is. But I will try and keep an eye on both. So, what do we think? What was that? Okay, so what are we thinking about? Item number 1. This is always kind of humorous because, of course, it's not something that my team works on directly. But we figure that, if Windows would just not break things, then it will be a lot more easy to patch, because a lot of times the reasons that that things break are completely outside of the update stack. And so when things go wrong, then it can be, quality is a part of upgrade. And this is something that my team, the Config Manager team has internalized, or did internalize quite a while ago when we were originally moving from our 4-year cadence to our 4-month cadence, which is that quality is part of the upgrade feature. And it's something that I lobby for hard in all my conversations with the Windows team. Unfortunately, the answer to this, and in terms of how we can address it, isn't really ship 0 bugs, because as I'm sure you're aware, there are about 10,000 engineers who work on Windows, which is a huge number, and they're all humans, or at least most of them are. And so they're going to probably check in bugs, and we need the right processes to make sure that those bugs don't get out the door, and ultimately affect enterprise environments. And so this is where efforts that we have around this are things like helping our customers leverage insiders more, right? Not something that everybody necessarily asks for or necessarily wants today, but we really hope that over time we can get more enterprise customers to validate Windows builds earlier, because overall that is one method by which we can get builds out into the wild and into the real world, so that they can get some validation before they get out into the production environments where they could do some damage. Because there's, we test heavily internally, but sometimes things slip through the cracks. And so we're trying to narrow that, make that mesh as fine as we can so we catch all those kind of errors. So Windows quality, always number one, always a looming problem that frustrates us deeply at Microsoft when something breaks way downstream of anything that we work on, but then updates become hard. Release validation. So this is around processes that help our customers validate new releases before distributing them. And this is the bucket that I would put our work on desktop analytics into. Hopefully everyone's heard of desktop analytics. Show of +1s or yelling or something. Oh, it's definitely quiet.
We got a lot of yeses in this room.
Okay, cool. And a thumbs up on the thread and a bunch of +1s on my phone. This is weird. I'm gonna have to keep them both looking. Okay, cool. Yeah, desktop analytics, like 1,000-mile view, is a solution that is now in public preview. Yay, public preview! Finally. And it is intended to help customers identify compatibility issues and kind of ultimately move from a place where you're manually testing everything over time to get to a place where you can use data that Microsoft has from our huge suite of customers, inclusive of consumer, and use that to help reduce the amount of manual testing that you have to do on at least your widely adopted kind of third-party vendor applications before you do each upgrade. And so that's release validation. That's one area of investment we have here. Update download size. So this always enters the conversation. How do we help you distribute the content that you need to get out to your devices in order to update them? And how can we streamline that process? Always enters the conversation. The work that we're doing in this space is around things like delivery optimization and LEDBAT will be the two big ones that I call out. Now, something I think a lot of people don't realize about delivery optimization is that people tend to know what it is and get excited about it and know that Microsoft is excited about it. But when we get down to brass tacks of what it actually is leveraged for in Config Manager world today, it's pretty much only leveraged if you have express updates enabled in Config Manager. So show of +1s and thumbs and yeses in the room from Frank of folks who are using express updates with Config Manager today.
Got a couple hands up here.
Couple hands. What percentage would you say? I have no idea how many people are there.
5%.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds about right. Yeah. So you guys, 5%, you're using delivery optimization today, if you have it enabled, to get that content out there because it's in the stack when you're using express updates. But other than that, today, most of you are not using it for update content. Now you might be using it it might be in play for things like store content. So if you have devices that can reach the internet and are doing language pack acquisition, then some of you might be using DO. If you allow your end users to go to the store to download apps, or if you are using Microsoft Store for Business applications, then DO would be in play. And one of the things that my team is focusing on here is trying to just expand that palette to make sure that that we can help you leverage DO for more workloads and make that content distribution easier. There's also, I also mentioned LEDBAT. LEDBAT is a kind of protocol level change that helps protect your network by using kind of dynamic throttling. It does have some server side prerequisites because it is a sender side technology. The way that it finally clicked for me what LEDBAT was I pictured, and I'm a huge geek, and I'm just going to further out myself as a huge geek, is that you can use, basically it's built on the concept that you can use the latency on a single connection in a network across any network, including the internet, to measure, approximately get to a heuristic of the traffic on that network. And so what leadback does is it uses a connection, and what I picture is the connection between, in Harry Potter, when Harry Potter and Voldemort like try and cast spells on each other and their wands stick together. For some reason, that image really helped me understand this. Once again, massive geek. And on that connection, when the latency goes down, then that means that there's more bandwidth available. And when the latency goes up, meaning the connection takes longer, packets are taking longer to go over the network, then traffic goes up. And what leadbat does is when it sees that the traffic on the network is going up, it will aggressively and quickly back off from sending content so that the normal workloads on your network don't get consumed. And so leadbat works today for distribution points in Config Manager. So your on-prem DPs can leverage leadbat if they have, I believe, Server 2016 minimum server OS. The other place where it can be useful is on your subs. So software update point traffic, scan traffic, and metadata transfer can also benefit from this. And you have to light that up today with PowerShell. If you look that up online, you'll find out that there's some manual stuff you have to do, but it is possible today. And we're going to light up UI to make it even easier for you in Config Manager in the future, but we don't have it yet. So it is possible today. Look into it if you have subs that are already running Server 2016. So that's download size and content distribution, and moving onward and downward. Pre-post. So we think a lot about pre-post actions. Naturally, so especially this is particularly talking about feature updates, right? So a central theme of my talk here is going to be that Microsoft in general has been investing heavily in making it easier for our customers to use feature updates. And the reason is that the teams that own the client and server for Windows Update, along with the team that works on Windows Setup, have been innovating for several years in the space, in the software update space, to improve and optimize the experience and the workflow for updating devices using a software updates-based workflow that uses Windows Update and Windows Update Agent. And you can imagine that. So if you picture Microsoft as like the world's biggest IT organization, they are updating Windows PCs across all consumer estate using this technology, right? So millions and millions of devices are updated from version to version every Windows release using the Windows Update stack. And so it's the platform that we have the most coverage on. And so it's very strategically important. It has been for us building a good story for them. And unfortunately, because of how the Windows Update service side is structured, basically we have several versions of Windows Update in play. So there's an older version of Windows Update called Microsoft Update v6, that we internally call it that speaks the language that WSUS speaks. And in practice, that's the service side version of Windows Update that our enterprise customers speak to, because they tend to be using WSUS and usually SCCM with WSUS or WSUS native, both of which would be talking to Microsoft Update v6 and not the newer version of Windows Update that internally we call Deployment Catalog, DCAT. That's the version of Windows Update that devices that run Windows Update for Business connect to, and that's the version that consumer devices connect to. And on our side, from a technical perspective, the code path that devices that update take is unfortunately quite different, like really different. It's a different protocol, and there are a whole bunch of benefits that have been added to updates that use DCAT that we don't benefit from in the old Microsoft Update v6 model. And so I'll come back to this in a little bit when I get to another topic that I'll cover here. But suffice to say, we want to help. It's not easy today for customers to use feature updates, and we totally understand that. And we are trying to make it easier. And part of how we make it easier is helping enterprise customers leverage this new version of Windows Update. And another part of it is supporting things like pre-post actions, because customers today who can't use feature updates will use task sequences, of course. Who's using task sequences to do updates? Lots of hands in the room, I'm sure. And we need to. That actually felt really weird, because usually I get some kind of feedback, but I don't have any here. So if I'm totally wrong, I need somebody to call me out.
Nope, lots of hands went up in the room. So
Yeah, cool. Okay. Yeah. So pre-post actions would be basically the ability to do some kind of scripting around feature updates so that you can achieve some things that you need to do to make it work. And we're not trying to rewrite task sequences. Task sequences are awesome and they're super powerful, and they are, in the words of the brilliant Mr. DC Tardy, who was on my team a while back, if you know what you're doing with task sequences, you can, toast bread and make a martini. But if you go down that path and you're that good at it, then you're also doing something that's so flexible and dangerous and powerful that it could even be in this gray support area. And we've kind of created this monster of this very flexible and useful tool, but the overhead associated with it is very high, and unfortunately the user experience side of it is not great, and the outage time that it tends to entail for end users is very long, and the user experiences that we show it, at least in box, there's some great third-party tools out there that will help you make it look better, but in box it looks pretty old school. It doesn't feel like a modern Windows update. It's very different, for example, from the experience that your end users would have if they have a personal Windows PC and they're doing a feature update there. And so for all these reasons, we're trying to help folks do feature updates. Pre-post is one way that we're hoping we can bridge the gap. You guys will know my team hates bridge metaphors now, so I probably shouldn't even say bridge. But there are some things that our customers will continue to need to do from a custom scripting perspective, and we hope to give them kind of the minimum ability that they need to get that stuff done. But some stuff should just work. And hopefully everything that I'm going to get through in the rest of this list will also just work. And so that stuff would be steps that we hope you can remove from your task sequence and remove from your upgrade workflow in general. And so that'll be obvious when I get to the next few ones. This is the reason that lots of people have steps for this in their task sequence, right? Drivers and firmware enumeration, packaging, servicing. This is an area where Microsoft could do a lot better. We are totally aware of that, and this is something that we think about a lot. Some of you might say, well, you can service drivers with WSUS, and that is true. You can technically, but has anybody tried that in the room or on the call?
Nothing here.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason most likely that you haven't tried it is because you heard somebody tell you to not do that. And the reason was that when you check the drivers category in Config Manager or in WSUS, it will sync down every driver known to humanity, which is on the order of hundreds of thousands of drivers. And then it is up to you to figure out which drivers are actually applicable and useful, and it's a nightmare. And so that's not a good story. So what we see our customers tending to do is using OSD to do the driver package deployment, which is fine, and we do support, but that puts the drivers out there. But then they pretty much don't service them unless things are broken, is what we tend to hear. And when they are broken, then our customers will do package or app deployments to update those drivers, or if they're using task sequences to do an update, then they will lay down new drivers when they do the update if there's any compatibility issues. But it's very hands-off. Our customers tend to run drivers that are out of date, and this causes all kinds of problems. The joke that I always tell is that what our customers tend to say is on the one hand, I need to be able to update my drivers really fast whenever there's a problem. And I need to be able to do it in a way that's not impactful and that's quick and all this stuff. But also, I never, ever want to touch my drivers. So it's like this tension, right, of I need this capability, but also I never want to use it, which I think has been kind of humorous for us as we try and reason through this. But what we'd love to do over time is build a model that instead of saying, check the driver category and sync hundreds of thousands of drivers, that would be able to have some kind of inventory-based model that would tell you which drivers you actually need and which drivers are out of date and that kind of thing. And so we're headed in that direction, but it'll still be, to be totally honest with you, it'll still be a little bit of time before we nail that. Now there are some things that are available to you in this area, and I'll cover a few of those later in the presentation here. So far I've had, and that's my, oh, here we go. I'm just seeing +1s in the messages here. I haven't seen any questions yet. If you have questions, let me know. Any thoughts on using third-party tools to do driver updates? For example, HP Image Assistant. Thoughts? Let's see. An interesting part about drivers is that there are always OEMs in play, even with first-party hardware, and so many of our partners will come up with their own driver management tech, which is cool, and it's very useful for customers today. Ultimately, the Microsoft direction and the way that we'd love to steer folks is to encourage people to put drivers on Windows Update and have that be the source of truth for drivers. And customers tend to agree that that's the path, but the process that's in place today is not stellar because there's a lag right now between what the latest drivers are from customers and the drivers ended up on Windows Update. Of course, OEMs, there's some tension because they want to sell products and they've made products that help you deploy and service drivers. But unfortunately, of course, they don't. HP doesn't also ship the drivers for Lenovo and Intel and all these other things, and so you can't they can't really have a source of truth for all the drivers that you need, and so it becomes kind of problematic. But these are all problems that we're wrestling with. Updates on Surface driver deployment in SCCM. We support it, and we are looking to improve it. I think the next thing. Oh, I hope I don't get in trouble here for spilling beans. Let's see. I don't want to lead the witness, but it's probably impossible for me to not lead the witness without being able to see or hear anybody. So the next thing I think that we're thinking about for Surface drivers is being able to do it, supporting a way to do Surface drivers offline, because right now it's not really possible because you can't do Surface drivers without Config Manager. So like native WSUS doesn't support Surface driver syncing, and so you can't. A lot of our offline customers, like air-gapped or online server offline client customers, can't necessarily, or I guess online server would work, but air-gapped customers or customers that have offline pieces of their network can't really do Surface drivers today, and so that's something that we're thinking about, problem that we're trying to solve. I'll leave it there for Surface drivers. Hopefully that helps a little. Why is it actually not possible to update SSU before cumulative updates in SCCM? When will it be possible? Good question, Karsten. I will cover that in a few slides. The answer is, well, I'll cover it in a few slides. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. Hi, Dune. What's the latest on installing servicing stack up? Oh, that's the same question. Good questions, Karsten and Eric. I know this one is very top of mind, and I will get to it in a moment. HPIA in my OSD IPU task sequences. Okay, yeah. HPIA is the HP product that does image assistant. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we talked about that. It's really cool. It probably helps a lot for HP. It doesn't help so much for other third-party drivers. I thought about using it lacks a good way of filtering a model. Yeah. Okay. So sometimes the third-party driver management tools are insufficient as well, is what we're hearing here. And it's good that you guys are kind of. It sounds like there's this common issue that you guys have with HP. That's why we love user groups, right? It's a place for us to be like, hey, we're not alone. We experience the same pain. Okay. That's drivers, and I will remember the SSU question because it will come up again. Modern driver management from SC Configuration Manager. Yeah, that's one we hear a lot too, Vern, is that there's a partner tool out there, Modern Driver Management, which does some really cool stuff, and we've heard that a lot of our customers who do successfully service drivers are using that. We're totally aware of that. Another big one for what we're thinking about in terms of updates, and this again applies specifically to feature updates, is language pack and FOD retention, feature on demand retention. So what happens here is if you're installing a feature update and you have any language pack other than your primary language pack on the device. So let's say you have an English device, but you have French and Spanish language packs on the device, for example, and you go through a feature update, those secondary language packs just disappear. They're just gone after the update. Total deal breaker for pretty much anybody who has either lives in a place that's bilingual or that services multiple languages. Very frustrating, and we heard it loud and clear, and it is something that we have plans to address because we need to. It's another reason that a lot of customers have to use task sequences today because they use it to stage language pack content and FODs that they need. App compat remediation. This is another, it's also related to desktop analytics in that desktop analytics deals with app compat. And over time, what we'd like to do is provide a better way for you to remediate compatibility issues that appear and make it a more automated process. So after your release validation, you've discovered a set of apps that have compatibility issues, and providing quick and easy ways for you to be able to remediate those compatibility issues, both in advance of an upgrade and right up against an upgrade through the pre-post technology that we mentioned. Because there are some actions that need to be taken right up against the update. If you have an app compat issue, for example, with third-party anti-malware or a third-party VPN or things that need to be up right up until the outage begins for an update, then you need to be able to take actions right up against the update for specifically for app compat things. And pre-flight checks is, I think, the last one. And that is in the same kind of boat, right? Things you need to do to check the readiness of device, not necessarily from a, like we already covered the app compat readiness, but readiness from a, is my device on power? Does it have sufficient disk space to actually succeed when the update completes? And so that's another thing that we're thinking about here. So given that that is the end of my list, are there other areas related to software updates and updating Windows, in particular feature updates that you think we have not called out here that are important? And are you comfortable with the order that I have here? Or do you think that there are items near the bottom that should perhaps be higher? This will be a little challenging to run remotely, but I will watch carefully on IM and see how I can keep up. And if nobody has feelings, then I will proceed as well.
I don't have feelings.
I got a comment in here doing that they should all be number one.
Okay, cool. That's good. Are there any other items that are not on the list that should be number one?
No hands going up here, so.
Okay, cool. That makes me feel good that I have a decent list here. If you think of things and you think, hey, man, I would really like Microsoft to be thinking about this as well when it comes to software updates, then let us know, and we will add it to the list, or we'll think about it, or both. Error equals success 0, 0, 0, 0. Yep. Yep, Eric, we're aware of that one. And Mr. W. Hamilton also likes the order. Excellent. Yeah, error success 0, failure 0 is my favorite error as well. Actually, no, sorry, that's wrong. Catastrophic failure is my favorite error because it doesn't tell you anything about what's going on, and it just makes it sound like it's really important and scary. Okay, so that's the list of what we're thinking about. I've done sessions where I just spent the entire time on that, so I already talked for like half an hour on slide 2. Like I said, I don't have that many slides, but that's kind of what's top of mind for us. Now, digging into a couple of these, feature on demand and language pack was a big one. Like we said, there's no way to preserve those, at least not out of the box. So there is custom ways that customers have made this work, and this usually involves deploying an application or a task sequence in advance of a feature update in order to to stage language packs and features on demand and do some readiness stuff. So we do have, by the way, so this what I'm describing is a super manual way to do it, but we do have some very large, in fact, our largest customer who is using servicing is using this approach where they'll deploy a task sequence. Task sequence will pre-cache content for the feature update. It will stage a bunch of features on demand and language packs, and it will stage some an INI file to prep some setup command lines and stuff like that. And then it will write a registry key, and then they'll deploy a baseline to a set of devices to build a collection based on those registry keys. And that collection is then used to target the feature update. So many hoops, so much jumping through hoops. But if you are willing to jump through those hoops, then you can get to a place where using feature updates today, if these are your only blockers, will work. Now, that's feature on demand. The second one here is no jump to latest. So one problem that customers who had tried out feature updates had told us was, well, okay, I installed my feature update, I managed to get around the other problems, but now once I'm up to the latest version of Windows, I am immediately not compliant because I might have deployed, for example, version 1903, and as soon as that version lands, well, it might be June, and the cumulative updates for all the months between the release of 1903 and June are already out in the wild, and they're not installed on these new devices. So that's another big one. And the final one, we already talked about content of, okay, how do I deal with these content things? And so trying to address these three problems, we have something that's been in the works for a long time, which is called Unified Update Platform. Have show of plus ones and hands in the room if you guys have heard of the Unified Update Platform.
Got a couple up here.
Couple, cool. That's exciting because usually it's zero. So nice. So Unified Update Platform is the new old method for packaging updates in DCAT, right? The new version of Windows Update. And I say new old because it's going to be new to enterprise, but it is the same packaging and deployment technology that consumer and Windows Update for Business customers have been using for a year and a half. Actually, maybe coming closer to 2 years now. And what we're basically doing is trying to do this translation between DCAT and the protocols that it speaks and the update packaging format, and putting those updates over to Microsoft W6 so that WSUS can understand them and our enterprise customers can benefit from some of the benefits of UUP. And so you can imagine this is really challenging. The technological problem that we're up against is kind of like translating Klingon to Old English. And so it's a lot of fun. And that's the reason that it has been slow going, to be totally honest with you. But we think the value is certainly there because it will help you get through all of these things here. So the first one is getting current and secure in one step. So you can pick, and basically what happens is you can pick and choose a patch level. So you get the feature update and you get an LCU with it, and you can choose whether you want. By the way, when I say LCU, I mean latest cumulative update, meaning the monthly updates. And you can pick and choose whether you want the March patch level or the April patch level. And that will help you get out of that problem where you're not compliant immediately. And then also features on demand and language packs will be preserved over the update, which is a big one. And then over time, this is going to come later, but over time, we'd also like to help you decrease your network traffic to PCs through some kind of delta content mechanism. I don't want to say express because I don't know necessarily that it will be expressed when we're done with it, but we want to help you decrease that content size. So we talked about this, download size, availability. So we're, like I said, it's available today for customers that are doing Woo connectivity. So if you have a personal Windows computer, then you're already using it. If you use Windows Update for Business, then you're already using it. And we want to get to a public preview before the end of the calendar year for our enterprise customers. We're in private preview right now. And so what does this mean? What does it actually do? What it is effectively doing is including the language pack and FOD content in both the feature updates and the monthly updates, the LCUs. And so that means that the content for each of these is much bigger. But the good news is that I should say much bigger. It's a few gigs bigger. It's not hugely bigger, but it's bigger. And the good news is that the FOD and language pack content is pretty much duplicated across each cumulative update and feature update. So that means that dedupe on your server helps a lot with reducing the actual size of a bunch of these. And the good news is that your clients only download the language packs and stuff that they need. So it's really only large content from the service to your server infrastructure, not from your client. So your client will know to grab only the language packs, for example, that are relevant to persist those rather than having to download the whole content. So when I talk about bigger, just to give you some vague idea of what I'm talking about, I think the FOD and language pack content is about 6 gigs in addition to the size of the update. So it's not like 10,000 times bigger, but it is bigger. And the benefits that you get are hopefully obvious, and hopefully that trade-off will not be so bad. And in terms of how that content looks, that is a bunch of small files. It's not one big file. That is, not one big 6 gig monster. It's individual files that make up the content, and that includes all your FOD content, your LCU content. And that last one, the second last one, new feature update is therefore released every month, right? And I say that in kind of quotes. What that means is that a feature update that includes the latest cumulative update is released every month. The feature update content actually includes the cumulative update, and it's republished so that when you look at your config manager UI, you'll see a feature update for each patch level, like I had mentioned before. Hopefully that makes sense. And then finally, with UUP, LCUs have the servicing stack updates included. Yay. So that is, to answer there were 2 questions on that in the IM window. That means that you don't have to worry about installing the SSUs first. They would just automatically get installed beforehand. So that's one that we know has been top of mind for many of our customers, given the past few releases where there's the past few monthly cumulatives where there's been SSUs, and we totally understand that there's anxiety around what happens if you don't install the SSU first. And we know that people are jumping through hoops to try and make it happen, given that they don't know what's going to happen if it doesn't. And there was that, I believe it was May, where there was a hard block in place, which caused a lot of pain, and we're acutely aware of that. So we are trying to help with that with the UUP. We're also looking at other ways that we can help reduce that pain in the shorter term from a feature work perspective. So we promise we hear you on the SSUs, and we're trying to make that better. Before I move on, that's a huge quantity of content. Do you guys have any questions? Just a little +1.
Yeah, I'm not getting any hands here in the room for questions. So.
Okay. Can you just tell me what people's faces look like? Are people?
They are very excited right now.
Okay. It's hard. I enjoy working with people face to face, and so doing it remotely is kind of funny because I can't tell if everyone's just mad at me and prepping their tomatoes, or if they're happy with what we're talking about. So. Dynamic update. So dynamic update is an option. I hope people know this. And if you have devices that you're okay with connecting to the internet, then some of these things that I mentioned as reasons that we're doing UUP can just work today. So dynamic update, for those of you who don't know, is a technology by which you can, that the Windows client during an update, like while setup is running, can reach out to Windows Update service and download content from the internet and add it as part of your update. And so this works for the latest cumulative update, so it can grab the latest monthly update. It works for feature on demand and language pack content, and it works for drivers as well. So your client at update time can go grab those 3 kinds of content from the internet if you enable a dynamic update. And there's an endpoint separate from the traditional Windows Update endpoint that devices will reach up to. So if you have some kind of firewall rule that you really can't have your devices reach out to Windows Update specifically, then they can still get dynamic update content. Now, we know that that's something that people don't want in all cases as well, which is why in our next release of Config Manager, I say next very loosely because we're going to ship it very soon. I know people are probably going, wow, it's 1906. Today's July 25th. When is it coming, Dune? When is it coming? And the answer is hopefully very, very soon. Stay tuned. And that will include a client setting that will help you disable dynamic update. You can also disable dynamic update with an INI file or set up a command line parameter. So if you need to turn it off, you can. It does require connectivity to Windows Update, but it can do a lot of the same stuff that UUP does. It can help you persist those language packs and features on demand. It can help you with service your drivers without having to ever having to touch language packs. Now you do have to be comfortable with getting the drivers that are on Windows Update. But when I ask people how their experiences have been in consumer where this is in play, typically people have had pretty good experiences. It may not be something that you're comfortable enabling on, very sensitive workloads, but for information worker devices and that kind of thing, it might be worth the trade-off and having a way for you to get to much more current drivers. So something I'd encourage you to consider. And you can turn it off. I already mentioned that. So that's DU, dynamic update. And those are 2 of the ways that we're trying to address a bunch of those kind of central update concerns. I wanted to talk a little bit about cumulative updates and how quality updates and how we've decreased the download size. Has anybody noticed that devices that are getting quality updates for Windows 1709 and later? Oh, hey, Frank, turn on the camera. How can I make that bigger? 1 second. I can see you, but you're tiny.
Well, I just tried to get it onto the room to set you up there, so you should have some of the room now at least.
There we go. Awesome. That helps me a lot. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, look who it is.
Sorry, I should have done that sooner.
It's fine. Like I had said, I like the feedback, so this is good. At least I can tell if you're frowning now.
Exactly.
So, 1709 quality updates. They got smaller. Hands up in the room if you notice this. Nope. Okay, so it just worked then. Matt noticed it. So the reason why is that it's not Express. So previously we had this thing called Express, and 5% of you approximately used it. Now that I see how many of you there are, that's some pretty good math. There's probably like one of you. Express had its problems in that the size on the server was really, really big. That's because what Express basically did was taking every single possible delta and put them into one big content and said, hey, put this on your server, and then your clients will be able to download a smaller content. So it was a trade-off between the server download and the client download, which is cool if you're okay with having really big content on your server. Which a lot of our customers are not, and so many people did not use it. It could cause some performance issues as well. In general, some people had a bad time with it. And I said 1709. My bad. I meant 1809. Oopsie. I meant 1809. I'm living a year later. Lost a whole year of my life there. So what we did in 1809 was instead of having all the combinations, the great brains over in Windows Update realized that we could, instead of doing that, have 2 deltas in each cumulative update. One delta that goes back to the RTM version of whatever Windows you're running, and one that goes forward to the next cumulative update. And by doing that, you don't have to jump from A to B. You can jump right from, like, here. Let me see if I can do something fancy here. You guys are about to see whatever I sketched last. And I don't know what it is. Oh, Windows Ink Workspace. What is this? Help me, Ink. Here we go, Sketchpad. Oh, wow, that's super. This is some insider secrets here. Sorry you had to see this. That's super, I know that's super interesting for everyone, so. But no, basically what we're doing is instead of, previously, if you were trying to go from patch 2 to patch 3 along your cumulative update timeline here with time going this way, my horrible finger drawing skills, you would have needed, if you were going from 2 to 3, then you would have to have content that included this delta. And instead of, and every possible delta, you know, ad infinity going this way. And so that content got really big. But instead of doing that, we're just going to hop from 2, and you would have, as of 1809, the ability to just hop here and then hop here. And that's all the content that you would need in that update. Instead of the original content, which would have, it would have this jump, but it would also have this one and 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 this one forever. And so the red lines being a much smaller piece of content and amount of code change that you need in order to move between them. And so the savings that you get are actually pretty dramatic. If I jump back to extend. You can see that the quality updates are, they're actually slightly bigger on the client than Express content would have been. I sure somebody much smarter than me could explain to you why. I don't think I can. But it is slightly bigger, but look at the difference on the server, right? So the Express update is huge because it has every delta, but the quality update piece is much smaller. So that's kind of the update download size. Hopefully it's something you didn't even feel to be totally straightforward with you. We were really nervous that there was going to be some problems. We tested very aggressively. We were super happy with how it did not cause any problems. And in general, it was all goodness. We don't have a model like this for feature updates yet. And we don't know whether we can build one yet, but we'd love to have one because it's worked great for quality updates. That is download size. Thanks for the shout out on Twitter, whoever that was. Ryan. Feature update offline time improvements. Okay, this is a fun one because I have a pet peeve when I see people from Microsoft getting in front of people and saying, "Hey, look how fast Windows updates," and it's in front of an enterprise crowd, and they don't necessarily understand, what the realities of the enterprise space are. So I promise you that I do understand what's. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about the wrong one. I'm gonna jump ahead so that I can continue my thought. This is what I was talking about. So I promise you that I do know that this timeline is not reality for you today. I fully appreciate that. But this is a great reason and a compelling reason, I think, to consider going to feature updates rather than doing a task sequence, right? The median upgrade time, feature update offline time, so the time that the user is not productive during a feature update, and this includes consumer, I repeat, it includes consumer, is 22 minutes, which we think is awesome, and it's just getting faster. And that downtime is continually going down. That's probably the number one most compelling reason for customers to consider trying to use feature updates rather than task sequences, right? Because the thing that feature updates do that that task sequences don't is that all the pre-work can get out of the way while the user is still productive on the device. So the end user is still doing their work, and they don't even realize that something's happening. And then they get prompted to reboot rather than install. And then when they reboot, it's just the commit phase of the update that has to happen. And when that happens, it's a much shorter period of time. They don't have to wait for the entire task sequence to run. So the outage time is much shorter. The other thing of the team and this is by the way slides that I'm taking from the Windows Fundamentals team that owns Setup, right? And they're also trying to bring down the number of reboots. So in 1809, there were 3 reboots necessary. In 1903, there's 2 reboots necessary. And in the future, they want to get it down to only 1 reboot necessary to do a feature update of Windows. And they're still bringing that time down. So once again, I'm not showing you reality for you today. I'd appreciate that. And hopefully this is just a compelling reason for you to think about doing feature updates and figure out what the blockers are for your organization to do this. Pro tip, if you might have an easier time trying this out if you are English only, and if you have relatively few models of devices, or if you don't use a third-party anti-malware. If all of those checkboxes apply to you, then you might have less work than you think to try and get to this 22-minute outage and have a really good update experience. If some of those apply to you, but not all of them, then there might still be some work to do, and you might have to do some custom stuff for now, and hopefully over time, we'll add the right features to the product, both Windows and Config Manager, so that you can get to here, because we'd like to get everyone here. Make sense? Jumping back here, the way that we're doing this of decreasing the outage time is, so there's kind of 3 phases to the update, right? There's what we call the down level phase, which happens when the user is productive. There's the outage, which is when the actual update is applied, and then there's then they come back online, right? And so what we've basically done to decrease the outage time is moved pieces of the update process from that outage phase into the down level phase so that they can happen in the background. And then in parallel, we're doing things like automatically running the down level phase as a low priority thread so that it's less intrusive for end users and so that they even notice it less. Now, there's a trade-off there. Running things as a lower priority thread means that they're going to take longer, right? And so anybody who has tried to do feature updates has probably experienced that they need to go change the maximum runtime on all those updates, because if they don't, then it will time out and they will have a bad time. And so we're aware of that. We've added in the next upcoming version of Config Manager the ability to set the default maximum runtime for future synced updates of specific types. I can show you that in a moment. And that will help, hopefully, with that problem of always having to set the maximum runtime on every individual update, which just gets super annoying. Okay. So that is this guy. We went through it. And so how do I benefit from this now? Because I know everyone's probably like, okay, Dune, this is great, but you're like off in and unicorn field here. And how do show me how to do it? So there will be you can go change this maximum runtime on a per update basis today. If you want to try and do this today, you probably will need to do that. Hands up if like the obvious litmus test for that is hands up if you do feature updates today or you've tried them. And it might be no hands. No hands? 1. Okay, cool. Did you have to change the maximum? Hands up if you had to change the maximum runtime to make that work. Same hand? Oh, okay. Did you not? Actually, gentleman in the black shirt, did you not have to change the maximum runtime when you were doing your feature updates?
I think it's you, Max.
Mine was more an experimentation.
He said that he said his was more of an experimentation with the feature updates. So. Oh,
okay. Okay, so that's possible.
You did have to change it. Okay, I have someone else in the room that might not have been in the shot for you, Dune, but yeah, he did say he had to extend the runtime.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. So we hear that a lot. We're trying to help with it. It is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, right? It's like having it take longer in the down level phase is okay because it doesn't impact the end user. But we need to not have Config Manager kill the update because it thinks that it's having trouble, which is what the maximum runtime is for. So the default was set kind of incorrectly or using an older model, and we'll let you set the default for newly synced updates in the next version of Configman. So we talked about that. The other thing that we should highlight here is that for now, the deadline for Config Manager still governs the beginning of the installation, right? Which means that when the deadline hits today in Configman, your down-level phase hasn't started yet. So you need to think about what your end user experience structure looks like. We have some customers who are doing this very wide today, and they're okay with how it works today, which is basically that you have required software updates. Software updates are required experience that counts down to a deadline, and then at the deadline, the installation starts. Now, with this decreased downtime and low priority thread model, after that deadline, you might have many hours of installation time happening. So that could cause a little bit of confusion for the end user, but then eventually they'll get the reboot experience, and then their reboot will be nice and short. So it's a trade-off that you've got to think about, and something to consider as you go down this path. I want to make sure that I'm not missing any questions. Not yet. Okay. Or so if you don't like this, or you want it to not run so slowly, you can change the setup thread priority. We have a client setting for it in 1902. You can also do it with an INI file. And what it does is setting it to normal will use more system resources, and it will update faster. So that means that it'll be, in theory, more intrusive for your end users, but it will take less time. And you can also set it to low, which is the default for, I believe it's Windows 1709 and later, which will run the setup in the background so that it's less impactful. Now, normal priority is the default for any media-based upgrade approach. So if you're doing task sequences, that's probably why you haven't heard about this at all, because you're doing normal. And setup is run, in both cases, whether you're doing a task sequence-based upgrade or a feature update. And it's just about how the command line parameters get passed to set up and which content is actually necessary to do the update that differentiates the two. So, any questions on any of that stuff before I move on? Very quiet, which is fine. Okay, cool. If you have questions, let me know. Well, it's actually not going to be quiet anymore because I have what I like to think of as a reverse Q&A before the end of my session, which is first I ask you questions, and then you guys can let me know what you think, or if these are crazy questions, then that's fine. But these are kind of just meant to drive a little bit of a discussion to help us understand whether we're headed in the right direction, once again, with those items that we had at the beginning, or some of the other thinking that we're having here. So what factors are used to build your catalog and to decide what to deploy? So that means, how do you decide which update categories you want to go check and sync into your environment, and how do you decide which updates you want to deploy? That's a question for folks on the call, folks in the room. Help me out.
We had one reply was their security team says get everything, basically.
Okay, cool. And then they just say get everything and deploy it as fast as you can.
Yep.
1 month. You get a 1 month for free.
1 month.
Okay, so you get an SLA. Okay, interesting. Okay, cool. Anybody else have a different thing that happens? Oh, here we go. One on the IM from Eric. ADR grabs all security and critical updates released in the last month. So that's how you. That's more of the how than the what. The reason that you. What's the reason that you do security and critical only, Eric? I'm asking obvious questions. I realize that. Eric, you can either unmute or you can type.
Same thing, and I haven't changed it mostly because I haven't had the time to sit down and see if there's something I should be applying, but I've missed.
So you're doing security and critical updates?
Skipping the recommended.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Is anybody else? Are there hands up if you're also have an ADR that basically does that security and critical? That's what we hear a lot. Show of hands in the room if that's what you're doing, or if you're doing something different. Can you explain to me why or what it is that you're doing differently?
So who has critical and security set in an ADR? Got a couple of folks. Okay. And then what else do we have, I guess, going on is the question. So what is it? Who all is using ADRs? Is everybody else using an ADR? And then you have different criteria is the assumption. Like Matt, what about you guys? So I know you got.
I think we do all.
You do all as well? Okay.
Okay. Wow, that's a lot of content. Like
Tell me about
just
it. We'll
yeah.
We'll create like save searches. We'll create like a criteria under like the software update code. Pull down everything that we want in the category that's certain age and not expired. You know, it creates a large criteria. You know, after synchronization is done.
Okay.
Everything goes.
And are all of these ADRs driven by security teams that are giving you guys requirements to do that?
Yep.
Okay.
We do updates because I remember there was at one point a lot of security updates that actually fell into the update category.
Okay.
Right.
Like was one. There was a couple of them that actually fell into the update category. So we pulled that in just to ensure that we pull those in as well. But we do have a validation period with our production team. They'll go in, they'll see everything that was collected by the ADR, and if there's anything else that the ADR didn't pull in for whatever reason, and it's rated high by security, they'll put it in.
Okay.
Okay.
So go back and look what else actually sent. Stop. Find out that it missed the flash update for some reason and drop it in my ADR.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Cool. Okay. Thanks, folks. This helps a lot. I know it might seem like obvious or like a weird question to ask, but so part of the thinking that my team is doing here is how can we build out the next version of the Windows Update service and the integration with that service in our management tools. And so questions like this help us with our thinking there to help build a solution that makes sense for you guys. So I appreciate it. We already talked about this. Let's skip a bunch of these. This is a good one. For what kind of content do you actively test? So do you test cumulative updates every month, or do you just let them roll? And then the same for feature updates or big updates. And what does your testing look like?
Go ahead, Matt.
So for monthly updates, we have all of our critical business apps test. We have a series of VMs that we put the content on and install on Microsoft Tuesday. They come in on Wednesday and test. We have since automated probably 90% of that, so that significantly improves it. We're looking to do that as what for the feature updates. Right now, what we have is we have 250 critical line of business apps that are even more so than we do on every month that we test as part of the feature updates, and they test that as soon as we get the image ready, and then basically we have a waves configured for each different business. So if there isn't an app in that critical business list, That's where we validate some of that testing.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, cool. Do other folks have similar processes for cumulative updates, or are there folks who do considerably less or even more? Yeah.
Can you hear them?
Yeah, I can pretty well.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. So, and that's not a bad thing, right? I know Matt's got complicated environment. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. So do you just let them roll? Sorry, maybe could you speak a little louder? I'll crank my volume.
I'm gonna try to do something here.
Yeah, there is some testing, but not that extensive.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're the same. We just rolled to a fairly small subset of users, all the Qubits.
Okay.
After a couple of days.
Now we have to get them out in 10 days. 90% in 10 days. So
Yeah, you're.
so that's why we have the rigorous testing, and we literally, and we have a very small pilot, because by the time we actually deploy them, we have to start deploying on Sunday with the deadline. So like our pilot is hope that everyone's online between Thursday and Friday, which everyone knows no one's online on Thursday and Friday. And so that's why we have such rigorous testing, is to make sure that our critical apps work fine, and then if one off breaks, we'll figure that one out later.
Okay. Cool. Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Let's see what else I got here. We already did that. Okay. Let's. That's lots of questions for you guys. We'll move to traditional Q&A now. If there are questions from you guys, I would love to answer those. Thanks for humoring me on my questions. That is super useful for me to hear a little bit kind of what your approaches are. So thank you. And I'm interested in what questions you guys have around updates in general, or I'll even widen it out further. If you want to just ask questions about Config Manager in general or about other features, fire away and I'll do my best. I don't know. I won't necessarily be able to answer, but I will do my best.
We got one here. So there is, it's really not easy to undo an update that has been deployed. So if you deploy something and it goes to a specific application and it breaks it, it's kind of like an oh crap kind of thing. And there's things you can do, and there's a command line you can run and uninstall specific updates. But is there any intention of putting something in the console that would help expedite that to where we're not kind of thinking about that as I'm rolling something out, like how do I undo this if it really breaks something?
Are you talking about applications, or are you talking about software updates?
Software updates.
Software updates, yes.
Easy way
So
to an update.
Yeah, so we have update uninstall is like number 6 on user voice or something like that out of globally. And I am super aware of that, and I keep on being like trying to front load it every release. We don't have it high enough in our stack right now, to be totally honest, that it's coming in the next release. But it is on our list, and I keep lobbying for it, and we will get it. And hearing it from you again helps me do that. Could I get some +1s or like vigorous hand waving from folks in the room who agree, who really want that? Because that'll help even more. Okay, cool. Great, thank you. Plus 1 million from W Hamilton. +1. Okay. Oh, I've got some questions on IM here, so I'm gonna make sure I get these. Sorry. Some of these are. Oh, okay, that's answers to my questions. Thank you. We pushed all updates to test group and then to validate our internal applications. Okay, cool. So there's app validation first. Nice. Okay, getting on here. Spoke earlier about the difference between classic Woo 6 engine versus the new engine used by Woofy consumer. When will we see this technology integrated with CM/WSS? So, good question, Charles. That effort to use the new engine is the unified update platform. So the unified update platform is a an effort for us to kind of translate updates that come from DCAT, the new version of Windows Update, and make Microsoft Update v6 understand them and WSUS, and therefore WSUS. So that's exactly the project that we're focused on for making that kind of translation layer and helping bring that value to customers.
So from an administrator's perspective, then that change will be more or less transparent. It sounds like it'll just mainly be in the background, what's happening in the engine itself, but not the way you would manage those updates within Config Manager or WSUS. Is that a fair statement?
That is the dream. We really hope that you do not have to worry about it at all. Okay. Whether that will be the case is yet to be determined. There's a chance, for example, that we might ask you to check a new category to opt in.
Right.
And we do, each time a new Windows release comes out, we have to make a decision whether we want to put that complexity on you guys of saying, hey, we're going to we could dual publish updates and say, we're going to take this update and put it in Movie 6, and we're also going to put it in DCAT and UUP publish it, which would mean that you could pick and choose. But eventually, we'd love to get to a place where we just only publish UUP updates, and then you don't need to worry about it, and they just work way better. Is that at all related to the reason that we had to select a new product for 1903 updates? Yes, it is related.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yes, it is related. We had thought that maybe that would be the cutover, and we were trying to kind of set the stage for this. So that's exactly why. Also, by the way, you'll notice when you update to Config Manager 1906, which is coming out very soon, that if you have the Windows 10 category checked in your feature updates or in your SUP, then we will automatically go check that new option for you. That's a feature, so that hopefully you don't even need to go take that manual motion if you haven't already. We'll check it for you.
So is it feasible we might see the opposite, not really the opposite effect, but a companion effect to that, to where not just the later releases, but also the older releases have their own specific product selection? In other words, so we don't download 1806 updates if we no longer have any 1806 updates in our environment, since you can't easily filter them out with your ADR. In other words, if you don't sync them at all, then your ADR wouldn't pick them up.
Do you guys know Brian Dam, or who Brian Dam is? Yeah. I know Brian Dam, vocal community member, has asked us for exactly this a bunch of times, and I totally understand. Like, you don't want to be syncing stuff that you don't use anymore, and we want to help you do that. To be honest, I don't think we have a hard and fast plan about what our publishing story is going to be from a category perspective. I understand that if we were to do that every release, it would help you do that. But we might be interested in providing you a different mechanism for you to do that.
And of course, you can always use title to filter it out, but that means now every time there's a new release, you got to make sure you attend to your ADR, which is fine. And that's the way I get around it with my customers right now that don't want to sync all that extra information and don't want to, they're still going to sync it, but at least now their ADR is not going to pick it up every month and add it to their groups when they don't need to. But just curious, because if at some point we just go in and uncheck it from the sub configuration, that would be a whole lot easier. So just kind of a wish list item.
Yep, totally understand. A Ward on, sorry, I don't have your first name, on IM asks, we like task sequences for feature updates, especially for troubleshooting and referencing its logs for failed upgrades. Have improvements been made in Windows 10 servicing so we can quickly gather logs for feature update failures? Great question. I almost wish I'd planted that question, but I didn't, because there's work happening right now in the teams that own Windows Setup to make this easier for you. And this is definitely top of mind. Charles has to drop. Thank you, Charles. Any other questions?
Yep, I got one here.
Yeah.
We're going to get better update notifications for our end users. Generally speaking, they completely ignore the 15-second toast notification and then yell at us for the 1 hour, you're going to reboot.
1902, I updated that, and then
They did for applications, but I didn't see it for patching.
patching is a lot better too. Now, I skipped 1810, but, and then I heard, and Jim could confirm, they're working on we had a a session at MMS just to discuss how that notification works with Avi. I don't know when. That might be a surprise for 1906.
There's some stuff in 1906, I believe, related to this. It's getting a little better. Before I tell you what it is, if you were to put your program manager hat on, what would you build first? What would you change and improve first about your end user notifications?
Let them know often and as much as possible.
Yes, ignore
As soon as it's available to them.
Just like take over the whole screen, like flashing neon.
Everything off and automatically reboot.
And you can only snooze for 5 minutes.
So this is a funny one because we always get mixed feedback on it. Actually, at that session that Matt mentioned at MMS, it was pretty humorous because a lot of people went into it thinking that they were going to hear the same thing from everybody in the session, and it was totally 50-50 of people saying that they want more notifications and more intrusive, and people saying they want less notifications and having different things. It's like totally like it's one of those things that people tend to have a lot of strong feelings about. And so we need to provide really flexible configuration for it. That said, we have heard a lot included they're not intrusive enough, and the stuff that we've done in 1906 is mostly around allowing you to make it more intrusive, particularly the restart notifications, so they don't get down to what I call the pain zone with the red unclosable countdown, which nobody ever likes, and that remains pretty much the only way that I can explain to my non-IT inclined friends outside of work what I do for work, because like, you know, the thing that you hate, that's what I work on. And so we're trying really hard to make that not as much be a thing. And Avi from my team, who was mentioned, is working hard on that. I used to own this, and obviously I didn't do a good enough job. And so Avi is taking the wheel. He's doing great work on it. And we're finally getting a lot of things that I've wanted for a really long time, like the ability to snooze those restart notifications, and provide more dialogues rather than toasts, because we hear all the time that the toasts are not great. How like I said I was done asking questions, but I guess I'm not. I have one more. How do you folks feel about the consumer user experiences? And how has your experience been outside of work with the updates? Because one thing that we've heard or we've toyed with is going down a path where our experiences start to feel more like consumer. Discuss.
This is Frank. I'm great with it. I love the consumer.
Does anybody hate it? W. Hamilton has thoughts.
I get updated like every other day, so.
Oh yeah, Insider.
Yeah.
Yeah, same. Consumer. W. Hamilton says, I like that the updates happen during times I'm not using the machine. Yeah, same.
Anybody
Okay.
else? Consumer feedback.
Like let's say in a wacky world tomorrow, and this will not happen. Spoilers, this will not happen, unfortunately. But if I said tomorrow, oh, you have a setting that you can give your end users exactly the experience they have in consumer, how many of you would give me a thumbs up or thumbs down on how you'd feel about that? Or whether you would not care. Not caring in the front row. Nobody else is even giving me a thumbs up or thumbs down. So kind of indifferent. That's good for us to hear. Oh, thumbs up from Frank. Okay. Yeah, would not care. We control it as much as possible. Okay, cool. Good to hear. It's something we've heard on and off, and so I just wanted to get a read of the room of how you guys feel about it. Okay. Yeah. So really long-winded way of saying, yeah, we know we still have a lot of work to do on the end user notifications front. We need to get more intrusive, and we also need to provide flexibility so that I just remembered something that's coming, which I'm really happy that we finally did related to this. So 1906, you guys should all upgrade to 1906 when it comes out, because and this one I definitely won't get fired for. Our new software is available notifications finally makes sense. Previously it was so ridiculous how they worked. You would literally get a new software notification every time the client started up if you had any machine available targeted policy app policy to your device. And so if you had anything, every time it fired up, you'd see a notification. That was ridiculous. It meant that many folks turned it off completely, and starting in 1906, it will actually only show new software is available for a small period of time after an app is deployed, and then no more. So I'm really excited about that. It seems like a tiny thing, but it's something that we've been asked for so freaking long that I'm very happy that we finally have that. So, and I know that's table stakes, so people are like, duh, but finally.
Yeah, that'll make Matt and his colleagues there very happy, that one. So.
Yep, I could see Matt on IM here. Yep. So yeah, 1906, upgrade to it. Any other questions? I would say I'm over time, but I guess I did not really have a time bind from Matt or from Frank, other than when you guys start looking bored.
Good.
So I'll say going once on questions. Going twice. Oh, do you have one?
No.
Nope. Okay. Then I'm going to call it. Thank you so much, Frank, for having me.
I got the last minute.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So it's more of a room question. Has anybody seen the Express updates continually fail on Windows 10 for days and days and days, and then all of a sudden decides to work?
I think you're asking that to one other person, just using Express Updates.
Yeah, exactly.
I use Express in normal, right? When you build, you do normal. After you build, you get your Express to make sense. But on a machine I built today, for 2 days it can't update.
So you're saying you're
Day
having
3 it works.
you have machines that fail
Yeah.
via Express Updates for several days and then just work on a random third or fourth day.
It works. There's no logging other than it can't find enough,
Yeah.
which doesn't make sense.
Did you hear that at all, Dune? Did you catch that one?
I did. So Express Updates failing all the time.
And then they
working. Do they work? So does it fail on a single device forever and then start working, or does it fail? It was failing in general for a while and then it started working.
Failed all of them for a time, and then they decided to become blind after.
And then that happens every time you deploy?
Every single month.
That's really weird. Can you email Frank?
Yeah.
And Frank, can you email me?
Yes.
And then we'll talk about it. We'll figure out what's going on.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, sounds good. Random one for the heck of it from E. Goodman.
Okay.
Has anyone seen slowness / timeout issues when installing updates to a machine with McAfee Solid Core installed? I'm seeing extreme slowness and timeouts, 2+ hours stuck on getting Windows ready during cumulative update installation, even when Solid Core is in update mode. Machines without Solid Core take the usual 30 to 45 minutes to install. Anybody using McAfee? Not very helpful.
Yeah, no.
Alas.
Moving on.
Moving on. All right. Well, thank you very much, Frank, for having me, and folks for your questions and your faces and your waving and your thumbs. Much appreciated. And if you have follow-ups that come up, you can funnel them through Frank, and I'm sure he'll be able to pass those along to me. And I still owe Frank an answer to his question, which I haven't.
Yeah, thank you, Dune, very much. Definitely appreciate it. Big hand for Dune here, everybody.
Thanks, folks.
Yeah, thanks, Dune. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right.
To everybody, that's it. That's all that I have for today. Hope everybody enjoyed the content that we had today. We obviously had 2 really great speakers. Everybody on the phone, if you guys are interested in seeing more of our group sessions and stuff, go out to our meetup site, meetup.com/CLESCUG. On Twitter, @CLESCUG. We have sessions quarterly, so we always try to get speakers and things lined up, fun stuff going on. So definitely keep joining us. We'll have sessions like this, and everybody is always welcome to join. We'll always have a team session like this going too. If you're not aware, the Teams meeting info will always be posted on the Meetup site and on Twitter. So if you're ever not able to make it, that's where you're going to find it. So I'm not going to add everybody individually. Obviously, that's going to be problematic for me to try to maintain something like that. So it's just going to be out on Twitter, out on the CLESCUG Meetup site, and on our CLESCUG site as well. So www.clescug.com. I'm just shamelessly plugging the heck out of everything right now. But yeah, if anything you need to see out there, again, use it as a community forum. So if you guys have questions that you want to ask your peers here that are local, please do use that there. We're all here to help each other, and we're all dealing with the same things most of the time. So with that said, I'm going to close it out. Again, thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dune. Thanks, Justin and Patch My PC for coming in. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thanks to whoever posted the meeting invite on the subreddit, because that was where I saw it.
That was Justin.
Justin, you're awesome, man. Thank you.
Yeah, he was all over it. He posted it everywhere. So, all right, thanks, guys.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.